Understanding household consumption trends. There has been much discussion on the state of India's household consumption and what is driving it, or more specifically, where is the slowdown and who's facing it? Is the narrative, for example, being hijacked by some companies who are facing pressure while others are doing fine, particularly in consumer products and maybe more particularly those who sell direct to consumer online? The data has also been giving out conflicting signals. Rama Bijapurkar, author, business advisor, and researcher of Indian consumer markets, wrote in a column in Business Standard a few weeks ago that the last year has seen frenzied and obsessive discussions on the state of the health of Indian household consumption, with economists, stock market analysts, media marketers all discussing it from their particular vantage points. Adding to the confusion, the available data, she says, sent conflicting signals. GST collections, that's goods and services tax, collections were up. Revenue growth of listed fast-moving consumer good companies was disappointed. Healthcare and telecom not bad. Two-wheelers not much to complain about. Second-hand sales did better than first-hand in some categories. And the divergence between the performance of companies in the same sector made average industry growth numbers meaningless. According to her, the consumption discourse needs more honest examination of the elephants in the room, like, for example, whether private sector investment is truly slow on account of poor demand. So I reached out to her and I began by asking her what drove her to write this piece and also her approach to make this consumption discussion more meaningful.
The listed company results have hijacked the discourse on consumption. The idea that there is a bellwether company in the old days, there was Infosys and there was HUL, and between the two of them, we knew exactly how the economy was doing. But I think today it isn't so anymore. And so this whole idea that because results of one FMCG listed company are doing badly, therefore consumption is bad, whereas you have so many other indicators to the contrary. I mean, as I say in my column, GST collections are up, small second-hand smartphones are doing well, two-wheelers have nothing to complain about, healthcare has grown, and also where I come from is the fact that the space for consumption has been, on the supply side, has been taken up by small companies who are now no longer the unorganized sector. They're actually lean, mean, smart companies who are giving big companies a run for their money. So, holistic look at what is happening in terms of, even if you must use sales data, a holistic look at what's happening to sales or customer spend is warranted rather than moaning and groaning about the results of one so-called bellwether company.
If you were to look at the entire, let's say, the quantum of consumption, so let's say it's 100 units sold by everyone, wouldn't the levers and Nestle's in, let's say, certain categories, for example, daily use categories, still represent a large portion of it or a chunk of it, and therefore also be symptomatic of what's going on the demand side?
Not really. I mean, I think over a period of time, as India has always had a large unorganized sector market, it's over half. In the past, we could ignore it because it was truly low quality for low price. Today, significant chunk of even everyday categories. I mean, I have, in fact, also I've just been looking. So if you look at, for example, let's say a Scotch-Brite sponge, it's 299 rupees for a packet of kitchen sponges. A Gala one is about 199. The numbers are I'd go on Amazon and look it up. One has a rating of 4.4, one has a rating of 4.1. One sells 5,000 units in the last month, according to Amazon, one sold 4,000. I go into a very small so-called supermarket in a 40,000 pop strata town in Tamil Nadu. I see both displayed next to each other. I go to Amazon, I see them displayed next to each other. And so it is true that for their categories, their price points, which is my point also about the Nestle CEO, that you're talking about UHT milk, which is expensive milk. You're talking about chocolates. You're talking about a certain kind of consumption of your portfolio. So how does the portfolio that Hindustan Lever chooses to have represent consumer spend? I also feel that there is intense intercategory competition. So therefore, people may be skimping and saving on. There was a consumer quote that I loved recently where this young lady said, और इतना डेट के लिए पूछता है, he asks so much for a date और देता है सिर्फ Cadbury, just Cadbury. So I mean, I think I don't know what she was expecting other than just Cadbury's. But cultural labels are changing. So I think we just have to change the way we look at consumption, and that's just the supply side argument.
So on the demand side, I think why people are perhaps a little apprehensive. So you're possibly right about a few companies hijacking the agenda, but I think if you look at the other indicators, one is GST numbers are more or less steady to flat and going up and down over the last year. So it's not like it's a rapid linear growth, which we thought it was. I mean, it's maybe 160,000 crores, 170,000 crores, back to 150,000 crores, and so on. So that's one. Second is GDP numbers are slowing down. And we've actually revised downwards now officially for 24-25 as well. So which suggests that the overall pie in across the spectrum is not growing and has only shrunk or relatively shrunk. So how would you look at then, or how would you place your argument?
Yes, I agree that consumption is when GDP slows down. But the point I'm making is that the discussion has to go via the root of income. So GDP is slowing down, or even at times when it is higher than we think it is, than we expected it to be. The question is, what is happening to household income? And whose household income? I mean, I think we now know that, and therefore I'm asking for a more nuanced argument because it's not a macro force with a magic finger like a tide that lifts everybody and tanks everybody. So it is true that the top 20% continues to stay stable, continues to get richer, continues to grow its income, etc., etc. So if you look at the drivers of consumption, there is income, there is employment. And my point is that yes, there is an overall slowdown, but why are we siloizing and disconnecting the investment argument from the economic activity argument, the occupation argument, the income argument as a result of occupation, and therefore who is consuming what? And so that's another thing for me of how not to do it is how not to siloize it. So, for example, there is a conspiracy of silence around the fact while we say 94% or whatever is informal, etc., etc., the nature of occupation is a lot of own account workers. So when economic activity is vibrant, everybody does well. When economic activity is not, everybody takes a haircut. But when I start hearing economists say that there is no investment or low investment or an investment slow because they don't see demand visibility, I have a big issue with it. If they don't see demand visibility in India, in the time that it's going to take for the capacities and so on to take off, I mean, where are they going to go and see demand visibility and compete? We've already seen India and go overseas, compete, come back, etc., etc. And it's not an either or. The reason they're not investing is something else. And so I'm saying, let's call out the elephant in the room, whatever may be the elephant in the room.
So let me pick up on two more points. And you talked about household income. So one is that household income, again, yes, salaries are growing and incomes are growing, but not as fast as they were growing maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And I'm talking about right now. There are two parts to this now. One is, let's say, if incomes are growing fast enough to match inflation, which clearly people are concerned. I mean, maybe the evidence is more anecdotal here, but it is definitely inflation is eating into consumption power. The second is the propensity to spend. Now, that is something that, so you may have the money, but you may still not spend it. And therefore, the outcome is the same. How are you seeing these two, again, when you look at how similar cycles have played out in the past?
So I would look at consumption with the question of with who and not a question of what, not what is being bought, but who is buying. We are finding that rich India continues to buy. Everybody is saying that. So rich India continues to buy. In fact, rich India is underserved. In fact, if you've been on the Christmas break holiday, you know how hard it is to splurge it up, even if you want to, because supply is constrained. I can't get enough. There are not enough business class seats coming back from anywhere. So I think that part of it is okay. It's underserved at the moment. You are right that there is inflation. That is precisely the discussion we should have. That people say this means the middle class is in trouble. I have a problem with that because a lot of the so-called middle class is not actually the middle class. Middle class, by definition, has to start with a reasonable surplus income of about 30% because that's what gives stability, it gives them ability to invest back and so on. So a lot of the consumption, and if you take, let's say, 20% slabs or quintiles, a lot of the consumption, we've seen this historically, in the middle 20%, the surpluses are so fragile that the minute you have an increase on any count, those surpluses, people are forced to make intercategory choices. So they were never middle class to begin with. So the overall argument that when GDP slows down, economic activity, it means economic activity is slow, it means incomes are slow. It therefore means that there will be tough spending choices. I take that. It is tougher with the middle, who we designated as the middle class, whereas they're not. And I think the upper class is doing well. So you will find some guys singing all the way to the bank and some guys not. The same Nestle chairman in his speech said that the rich are buying like it's going out of style or something like that, he said. But the incremental consumption that you get in good times from the middle of the consumer base by way of income, upgrading to occasional indulgences is not happening.
And that is because, I mean, just to go back to where we started.
Because they have fragile surpluses, and those fragile surpluses are wiped out the minute you have inflation.
I mean, the way we should look at or define middle class is when any family has 30% surplus income left at the end of the year.
Yeah, at the end of every month. I mean, routine expenses. I'm also saying there has to be resilience. Resilience means you fall off and you come back up. Resilience comes when you have an occupation, not when you're an own account worker of any. When you have a profession, a calling, a pesha, right? And that tells you the quality of how you earn. So if you are wandering casual laborer in good times, you can sort of do well enough. You will see that in the occupational definitions. But if you are a plumber, a carpenter, an electrician, you have work to do. If you have some kind of a professional qualification, forget about a regular job. If you have haath mein kaam, as they call it, even if times are bad, you can bounce back. So we're looking at resilience, we're looking at surplus income, we're looking at reasonable levels of skills and education to qualify you to be able to earn a decent living, right? And that's how you get intergenerational progress. That's how you get them reinvesting in their lives. And that's what gives stability to a country and a society, a genuine middle class. So middle class is not income between X and Y, broaden X and Y, and you will keep increasing the number of middle class. We can say that when we are selling India, but I think we shouldn't smoke our own dope.
So you talked about the rich being underserved, and I think you've given some good illustrations. I mean, I could add, let's say, 5-star hotel rooms in resorts in India, or even for that matter in cities, and what price we are forced to pay for it. Can one survive, or how many people could survive by only serving the rich, which is underserved in your estimation? And can markets exist like that?
You'll be surprised at how many companies do not go below serving the top 20%. I mean, I think there are a handful, as I have also been saying for a while, and in my book as well, that there is a handful. Some of the handful are again beginning to question the pain of the mass markets, because the pain of the mass markets is also small competitors. That is the issue. If you talk about the stock market, I think it is of the rich, for the rich, by the rich, of companies, barring a handful, that do not serve anybody but the rich. So if 50% of India's household income is with the rich, and we can't say K-shape on the one hand and not go through with the implications on that. I think people are saying, and to put it politely, that why should I kiss the frog when I can kiss the prince? The frog will eventually turn into a prince because I can kiss the prince. The only point is that mass markets like Time and Tide don't wait for you. And that's why the small businesses have actually started doing so well, because they now have access to so many of the ingredients that earlier were not available to you. You didn't have access to media, you didn't have access to markets, but now you have marketplaces, you have media, you can Insta. You look at the number of guys on Insta, they're so bloody damn good, right? So even the rich end is not safe. In fact, I was thinking yesterday that perhaps the big companies are better off serving the mass markets, because that's where they can build scale, they can build predictability, they can hold prices when it's needed. And those are the guys, that's where they might win. So on an attractiveness, competitiveness scale, I think there are real choices to be made. But yes, if you think that you are serving 50% of the GDP of the fifth largest economy in the world on track to the third, I think you can build a pretty nice business. Thank you very much. Even if you look at our total private final expenditure, and if you look the turnovers of many of our top consumer-facing companies, there's enough room.
Right. In your column, you said that CEOs should quote economists rather than the other way around. What did you mean?
I absolutely love the Nestle CEO. I think he's a very sensible person. And I think that when I go on to conference, when I go on to webinars and so on, where there are senior economists who are quoting CEOs, I'm thinking this is not right, because this CEO is talking about is giving a press release, a conference on the 1% growth of the categories that he serves compared to what he served last year. And so when that becomes received wisdom for economists about the state of health of the economy, I think the Nestle chairman would also agree with me that it's much more comforting and reassuring if there is a de novo analysis ground up by economists, which chairmen of companies look at and decide to predict their future, rather than the other way around, because it makes me nervous.
Good note to end on. Rama, thank you so much for speaking with me.
Thank you, Govind.